Our elf on the shelf came back in December with a note that said, "Miss me, bitches." Um, so, we'll just go with that. It's Parenting Porcupines, Libertarian Moms. We're back. Can I tell you, everybody has said to me, like, I can't believe you guys did Elf on the Shelf for as long as you did. Holly is 14 and we're still doing Elf on the Shelf. And Elf showed up as a secret agent elf. And the book that Elf left for Christmas is all in code. And she had to uncode it to figure out what Elf's message was, which is the same every year. It's eat more vegetables next year. Welcome to Parenting Porcupines. This is the Libertarian Moms, Casey and Melissa and Jessica, back with you. And last year in 2022, Jessica Etheridge ran for lieutenant governor and Melissa ran for county council, school board. And so we're going to talk about what we learned during campaigning. I did not run because I'm a big coward, but it's coming. It's coming at some point once I pay my taxes and have
you did all the important work though, because you were
did back.
I did some back end work. We're going to talk about all of that. The point here is so there's a lot of stuff out now, right? She Should Run, women candidates, how to get ready to run. Like there's a lot of organizations that are trying to get more women out there, create more female candidates. We know that representation is dramatically low. Like even with as many people as we sent to Congress this year, it is probably the most diverse Congress we've ever had before. And still 86% are white males. So like, we've got a problem there because 86% of the country is not white male. So we've got to do a better job of representing the rest of us. 51% is the goal. At the very least, 51% female is the goal. And we want to get back in the game. But before we do that, we want to take the lessons that we've already learned. You can get all of those show notes, everything we're going to talk about is out on our blog. Let me put that site up here for you so you can see it. But let's start with you, Jessica. Statewide office. What is that like? How does it feel? Like you're on all kinds of handouts, your picture is everywhere. Like, tell us what your experience was being a candidate for statewide office.
I think the first thing when I was considering putting myself forward for that, sorry, there's a moth in here, y'all. It's crazy. It just showed up like as soon as we go live. That's
no one ever leaves you alone.
I mean, yeah. Can I get them in it? Shit.
It's an insect conspiracy.
It is. So the first thing, I was really worried about the exposure, right? And I think that's something that a lot of people, especially women, worry about is that exposure, because when you run for public office, whether it's at a local level or state level or national level, there is the potential for a lot of things that come with that exposure, because you're not only exposing yourself, you're exposing your family to that publicity as well. And so, I checked in with my family before I made that decision. They were on board with it. Try to really kind of keep them out of that spotlight though. Sorry, the moth really threw me off.
No, it's fine, because I want to actually I want Melissa to build on that, because Melissa, this isn't the first time you've run for office. So in the campaigns that you've had, did you do that too? Did you check in with your family? Did you talk to them about what the impact would be?
Oh yes, because I've got 3 small-ish, they're not so small anymore, small-ish children that I'm the stay-at-home parent. So I get them to school, I get them from school. If I'm not there, it throws the whole system out of whack.
Right.
Because my husband's at work, he can't do it. So if I get elected and have another commitment, what are we going to do? It would cost us a lot of money.
Right.
For after school care or daycare, or, it's more than just, do I want to do this?
Do you
Yeah.
think that's a prohibition for most women that are thinking about running for office? Is like, what's the impact on my family? What's the
Mhm.
financial impact? Who's going to care for my kids when I'm not available? Like, is that a thing?
I absolutely think so.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
Part of the
it
reason we're
it-
not at 51%.
Yeah.
Yeah, it never happened to me, but I've read articles about, you know, women get asked, "Oh, how does your husband feel about you doing this? Who's watching your kids?" No one ever asks the male politicians, "Who's watching your children right now?"
Right.
Because
Mhm. People say that to
who
me.
cares who's watching their children?
Yeah, people say
Right?
that to
Their
me
wives
as
don't
a
do that.
working mom. Like if
Yeah.
I have to
Yeah.
travel for work and they'll say, "Well, who's going to take care of the kids?" Their fathers. Like
Yeah.
there's a whole other half to this
It was not an
equation.
immaculate conception
Like
here.
I didn't
Yeah.
just magically pop out these crotch muffins myself. Like
A host of angels. There's a host of angels that came to me. And when they said to me, "You will have the child of the Lord," I said, "Who will babysit said child?"
It's just, yeah, because it comes with all those expectations.
Yeah.
Right.
and there are a
Exactly.
lot of demands too. There are a lot of demands. So I do think that's a big concern for women, probably more than it is for men.
On
Yeah.
our show notes, which are out on the blog on parentingporcupines.com, one of the questions one of the first pieces I put in there, which is the one I guess is up on my brain, is earned media versus paid media. So let's talk a little bit about that. So we're members of the Libertarian Party here in South Carolina. We are clearly third party outsiders, spoilers, whatever you want to call us, right? Misunderstood, blah, blah, with the blah, blah. But at the end of the day, you still need somebody to pay attention to you.
Mhm.
And usually that attention starts with media. And the earned media is where you do something super fantastic and the media shows up to be part of that. And then the paid media is where you put your donation dollars into purchasing ads. We, of course, as a Libertarian Party, as a third party, don't have those massive coffers to be able to pay for paid media. So we tried to do a lot of things that were earned media. What are your thoughts as far as media coverage? What would you have liked to have seen? What did you experience that was surprising? I mean, just riff a little bit on media coverage and how that helped or hurt your campaign.
For the governor's campaign, the governor and lieutenant governor's campaign, we did not get any media coverage until the very end. We had a couple that would pick us up when they were talking about the candidates that are on the ballot, and they would just kind of mention us. Our mentions were always much smaller than the others. It would be just a few sentences. One of the very first articles that did not mention me actually was here in the upstate where I'm from. And they were, the writer of the article was talking about Joe Cunningham potentially choosing Tally Casey for his running mate. And it was, this big thing about, oh, she's from Greenville, she's being considered. And at that point, I had already received the nomination from the Libertarian Party. And Pam Yvette is our current, well, she's our current now too, because she was reelected, but she was at that time our lieutenant governor. And all three of us are from Greenville, from the Greenville area. And so it was really disappointing to me that I was completely left out of that conversation, because I think that media had a really good opportunity to showcase, especially with it being an upstate media outlet, to showcase that we had 3 women in the race from Greenville. Like, how awesome is that? They completely left me out. It wasn't until we all tweeted at them, wrote them emails, they added me, and they misspelled my name. So it was like, really? You can't get that right?
And it's not like it's a big secret. I mean, you were registered on the ballot.
Yeah.
Like it was there. Like all you had to do was call the Elections Commission and you would know who these candidates are. So like,
they're willfully
come on.
choosing to ignore.
Yeah.
at that
Yeah, I was
point.
gonna say. So do
The-
either do your work and do the research
Mhm.
and then represent the truth, or you are, as Melissa said, willfully ignoring
Yeah.
a third party.
The only significant coverage I got, I was asked to do an interview with South Carolina Voyager magazine, and it was a wonderful write-up. We went into how I got into this, what was my background, my professional background, as well as my involvement with the party, the things that are important to me as a person. And so it was a really great interview. And that was the only one. And no one else covered us, with the exception of just mentioning us as being part of that slate of candidates. Until I got national endorsements. I was endorsed by both Jo Jorgensen and Spike Cohen, who were the 2020 presidential and vice presidential candidates for the Libertarian Party. They both gave me really great endorsements, which I really appreciated. So grateful to them for that. But our campaign wrote a press release and they literally copied and pasted it.
Mm-hmm.
That was it. And so it was just very disappointing that we were just completely omitted. And it wasn't until we had something big that they reported it. And even still, they didn't really report it. They just kicked out what we gave them, which was really just disappointing.
There's such
They were
a
just filling
slouch.
space. Yeah.
There's such a slouch there in media. And I'll be honest with you. So my very first job out of Clemson was a sports writer. And my first role at a community newspaper down in Georgia was to type the press releases up so that they could be included in the newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't told to call the press release contact and get an interview for each of these press releases and create an article. I was told to use the press release. Like, that was the editorial direction I was given as a cub reporter at $7.25 an hour. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, when I think back on that, I'm like, man, that was 1999, right? Maybe 2000 timeframe. So like, we've seen this decline of press coverage anyway, where the reporters aren't doing their job. They're not actually investigating. They're not actually building stories. They're not writing anything brand new. And I'm not sure that's a big surprise, except that it's just really disappointing because we want better news coverage. We want better journalism. And for whatever reason, they don't think that we do. They don't believe that we want better journalism. Melissa, did you get any coverage on the school board race? I mean, was there any coverage in Charleston at all?
Yes, it's nonpartisan. So no one knew I was a libertarian. So they cover everybody.
Good.
Wouldn't it be nice if that's how all the races were?
It would
That
be.
they covered everybody.
If they were nonpartisan, so it didn't matter what letter you had behind your name.
It actually had to come
You
with
had
some
to-
ideas and yeah. So
That's an
the
interesting
coverage
strategy to
was-
make all races nonpartisan. In which case, right, it wouldn't matter. It would be anybody and everybody.
Mhm.
And then, so the partisanship piece, right, the major party piece is to create some levels of validation, right? There's enough people here so that we're not wasting our time on candidates that just because they showed up one day, paid the fee and wrote their name down, they ran for office. And the question is like, and I say wasting our time is like, that's the narrative, right?
That is.
But the flip of that is like, when people complain about money is what buys elections, the reason money buys elections is because money is what backs what are so considered to be legitimate candidates. And let's be honest, is Herschel Walker a legitimate candidate for fucking Senate? The guy's come on, like, who on the planet besides Trump thinks that this is a legitimate person who could actually be a senator? Like, anybody who ever heard him say anything out loud was like,
He was so bad. That
I mean,
was so
come
bad.
on, right? Like, so I think I guess the point I'm trying to make is like the mechanisms that are in place to create legitimacy or to be gatekeepers to make sure that the elections are spent on real candidates, serious candidates, qualified candidates. they're not fucking working. Those
Mhm.
mechanisms
and-
aren't working.
Yeah, and you're hitting on the problem we have during the presidential elections. There's literally 3 people on everyone's ballot. One of those people does not qualify to get on the debate stage
Mhm.
because they're not included in media coverage or in the polls, and you can't be included unless you're in the media coverage or the polls.
We weren't invited. The governor and
3
lieutenant
people
governor.
is too many, apparently. But 17 people in a primary is fine.
Yeah.
But 3 people is too confusing.
We were left out of
Add to that
the.
because the
yeah.
depth, I think that's one of the things we learned from the campaigns. The depth of corruption in the process was
Mhm.
something we were not,
Insane.
we weren't
Yeah.
fully aware of. Go ahead, Jessica.
Yeah, we weren't even invited to the governor and lieutenant governor debates.
There's only 3 people. How
Yeah.
is that too many people?
Yep, not even invited.
Even though you had done what you were supposed to do,
Mhm.
you had filed your paperwork, you were a legitimate candidate, and
Mhm.
yet the people who hosted the debates for lieutenant governor never even invited you to be part of that.
Mm-mm.
And the same with
Because
the
you
governor.
didn't have
I didn't
earned
meet.
media coverage because the media chose not to cover you.
Well, it's not even
How
the
is
earned.
this-
It wasn't even earned media coverage because the other candidates didn't have the earned media coverage.
Mhm.
What they had was paid media coverage. They had paid the media to be at certain places they had been at. They had bought advertising with the media, and that's how they ended up there. So you needed a certain amount of media coverage, but because we didn't have the paid media coverage, we didn't have any media coverage. And so now that's why part of our strategy for the next 2 years is to force that earned media. Do something worth covering, right? Do something that says you can't not pay attention to us.
But I
We're gonna
want
end
to
up with like
be.
motorcycles jumping over, wrecked cars and stuff.
But I want to be perfectly clear on something. Perfectly clear that it should not matter how much media coverage you have. It should not matter how many donations you have or any other arbitrary bullshit. If
Stupid
you are
metric.
on the ballot, if you qualify to be on the ballot, if you have filed to be on the ballot, you are legally on the ballot, you should be on that debate stage. It was so disappointing that a debate hosted by SCE-TV, which is the public television entity
Paid
here
for
in
by
South
the
Carolina,
taxpayers and the voters. Yeah.
funded by taxpayers, would intentionally omit candidates from a debate stage. Period. There should be no qualification for the people of a state to hear from the candidates who are running for office.
Truth.
Period.
Yeah. Agreed.
It makes me angry.
And the people who've gone through the process of putting their name on the ballot and have and campaign, like these things that have shown seriousness of purpose, simply showing up and putting your name on the ballot is enough seriousness of purpose for me. That there
100%.
doesn't in the state of South Carolina, there doesn't need to be any reason for them to limit access to that, to those candidates. And here's the thing, had there been, to Melissa's point, 17 people, right? So we saw 17 people on the debate stage in the Republican primary for presidential elections a few years back. And the bottom line is nobody got a word in edgewise. Like it just didn't matter, right? Those debates were chaos. They were crazy.
They were a cluster. Yeah.
Yeah, they were crazy. But at least we got to see everybody. At least we saw that there were a huge number of people out there that were wanting that top position, right? Where this time around, because even just the 3 people that we had available for lieutenant governor or governor weren't included, all we thought we had were those 2 options. And that's just inexcusable. And especially SCE-TV, like I'm not afraid to call them out, because especially SCE-TV that is funded by South Carolina dollars should have known better and should have done better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they didn't, and I'm sure I didn't watch it, but I am sure they didn't say at the beginning, there are 3 people running for governor. One of them did not qualify to be here.
And we've only
did.
included 2.
They did at the very beginning.
Oh,
They
did
did say, they did say that Bruce Reeves was running
that's
as a libertarian, but that he was not on the stage because he didn't qualify. They did make sure they said that because I
Oh.
think they knew
I'm
there was,
surprised.
yeah, we were already making some noise about it. And so I think they did that just to kind of,
Well, their
cover their
qualifications had
asses.
not been
CYA,
published
yeah.
before.
yeah.
Their qualifications for that debate were not published on their website before the debate occurred. And so we made a lot of noise about how the qualifications for debate had not been published before the debate invites went out.
Mhm.
And that was the big thing, is like, if you know before the invites go out what you have to do, then you're going to do it, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Then that's fair.
we
Yeah.
had campaign money. Like, we could have done that. We could have bought some paid media. We could have put him on radio shows. And I mean, we could have found a way to meet those qualifications, but we didn't know what they were
Yeah.
until after they had already made their selections. And then once we started saying, like, just what the fuck, SCE TV, they were like, oh, well, here's the qualifications and you didn't meet them. And you're afterwards like, well, if we had known that's what they were, we would have met them. And
Yeah.
so now, of course, because this is where they just keep moving the line, right? I don't know if you guys are musical theater fans, but there's a great show that NBC used to have called or what was it called? I can't remember. Anyway, it's about Broadway. And there was a song in it called They Just Keep Moving the Line. Smash. It was called Smash.
I loved that show. Yes.
We loved that show. It was so great. And the song it was They Just Keep Moving the Line, where it's such a great song too, because it was like, every time I think I'm doing what they want me to do, they move the line. And this is the story of third party candidates, is that the minute that we get to where we're supposed to be, they bump the line back again. And that's why the experience we're having is a rigged election system. It's not because the Democrats are falsifying ballots from supposedly overseas soldiers. And it's not because the Republicans are out there threatening, gay voters. It's because they keep moving the line and they won't let more candidates into the fold. Anyway, all right, let's move on. So from the media piece, the next question is relevant milestones. What were some of the milestones that we set out for the campaigns? And what were the things that you felt like you met, or you felt like maybe we didn't quite get there? And the reason I ask this is because we're spinning up a new set of campaigns now, 2 years from now is presidential election. And I'm frustrated by efforts that don't demonstrate we need these milestones, right? That say, like, let's do this, boom, let's go. And like, everybody's running like a whole bunch of kids on a soccer field chasing a soccer ball, but there's no sort of organization around, these are the milestones. These are the things we need to see that demonstrate actual progress. So Melissa, when you think about campaigning for school board, when you think about putting yourself forward on the ballot, what were some of the milestones you had for yourself that you were like, hey, if I do this number of events, or if I have this amount of support, or if I get these endorsements, or like, what were the things that you were building for yourself in terms of like, I want to hit these goals?
Oh, well, legit. I had a Facebook page and I filled out the surveys. That is all I did, because it was 3 kids, Sports Central. I had 0 time. So my metrics were fill out all the surveys. And I did. I got them all done. So that was great.
No,
And
but look,
can I
that's
tell
a
you,
legitimate.
I didn't win my election. It was a 3-way race. I was 500 votes behind. So, I mean, just filling out the surveys for something super local can be enough, maybe, and a little bit more,
but not active campaigning. Like, you didn't have signs or
nope.
Okay, that's
Nope.
actually good to know.
For that.
Yeah, that's actually good to know that active campaigning and signs didn't necessarily make a difference. It's only 500 votes. I got you.
Yep.
Jessica, what do you think? What were some of the milestones that you could have, or that we should have? Because I was your campaign manager. Like, what were some of the things that we said, like, hey, we want to make sure we do this. We want to make sure we do that. Like, what were some of those milestones like for us?
Well, first of all, I wanted to win, which we did not do. But as mentioned, we had some odds stacked against us. So, no, I think one of the main things that we wanted to do, because as a party, we've never really had a statewide candidate at this level, right? And so we didn't really have a blueprint for what that looks like. And we use this as an opportunity to, because Casey and I are both operational people. We love processes. We love documentation. We both run businesses. So, we both together wanted to treat the campaign like a business in the way that it was managed and run, keep it organized, keep the teams, kind of in lanes to make sure that everybody stayed on task. And Casey did an amazing job of mapping that out for us. And so I think we did a really great job of working that plan, right? And building this blueprint for whatever comes next for all of us, right? So I think that was the biggest thing that came out of it. As far as personal milestones, I've always been somebody who cares a lot about what people say, about what people think. And so this campaign was a really cool opportunity for me to really put myself out there and expose myself, but to develop some resilience, right? So by the end of the campaign, where originally or at the beginning, I would get really upset about the things people would say about, my interviews or appearances or whatever. But by the end of it, it was just kind of like, whatever, they're going to say what they're going to say. It's really not that important. If they're not helping, if they're not picking up a shovel, they're in the way. So it doesn't really matter. And that was huge for me personally. It sounds like a really small thing for most people, but for me, that was a really big thing.
Yeah.
So
there's a really good book called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck.
Yeah.
I suggest you read it. It's wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
I've absolutely read that book.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure, actually, I think I listened to it on Audible, and the author actually reads it himself, and there's no bleeped words. Like, it's literally every time he says the word fuck, there it is. It's
wonderful. It has changed so much.
But Jessica, for you, when you went out campaigning and on the campaign trail, because you're not an extroverted person, you're somebody who does very much keep to herself, and you do a lot of listening and thinking about what you're hearing. This becomes a test for you out there, meeting strangers, hearing what they have to say, not immediately having a rebuttal, not trying to convince them of your point of view, but instead just sort of soaking that in. So like, what did you learn as you're out there listening to folks? Like how not just about yourself, but also about what do South Carolinians really care about?
Yeah, it was a huge challenge for me. But it was interesting because I found that I really enjoyed it. Talking to people, being out there and hearing the things that concern them was probably my favorite part, because it wasn't just talking about how much we hate the Republicans or how much we hate the Democrats. It was actual substantive conversation. We were talking about not only the challenges that they face, but what the solutions could look like, what would benefit their families. The biggest concerns that people wanted to discuss were inflation, taxation was a big one, and occupational licensing was surprisingly a conversation that we had a good bit, because we went to a lot of small town festival type environments. And so we were talking to a lot of local vendors and local, people who were there. And in those types of environments, you often have a lot of little tiny business owners, people who have little side businesses and things like that. Those were the biggest things, I think. And then a lot of people wanted to talk about the corruption. They wanted to talk about corruption at their local level, in their local government. And they wanted to talk about corruption at the state level and the national level. That was actually a topic that came up quite a bit. It was interesting to me that the things that a lot of the surveys told us would be important were not the things people wanted to talk about. They didn't want to talk about abortion. They didn't want to talk about education. They wanted to talk about those things that were hitting them in the pocketbook.
Yeah. Or in the there was a sense of like things can't go on this way.
Right.
Like there was a sense in every conversation we had, it was like, this is unsustainable. There's corruption in my local government. This is unsustainable. There's a lot of inflation. Things are costing a lot of money. This is unsustainable. Taxation is really high. This is unsustainable. There was like a sense of like, things can't keep going the way they're going. We need change. We need something different. We need a new approach. And I'm with you. Like the best part to me was asking people questions and like trying to prompt a couple of things that I thought we could be strong on, and then listening to them respond like, yeah, that's interesting, but here's what really matters to me, and gaining their trust enough that they were willing to share what their real struggles were, especially when we went to the barbecue festival in Greer. And these are all small time vendors. And by that, I mean, like, these are people this is their side hustle. Like their full-time gig is 8 to 5 in somebody else's company. But on the weekends, they're going out there and they're entering barbecue contests, and they're building these, barbecue sauce businesses. And they're imagining that someday this could be the thing they do. And I would just like, as an entrepreneur professor, I'm like, tell me more about how you're building your business. Like, let's talk about how to get government out of the way.
Yeah.
How to get government out of the way. And so that was really interesting to me too. I think the things that people care about are the things that show up day in and day out. And if you ask them something about abortion, they're going to have an idea, but that's something they might encounter once or twice in their lifetime.
If at all.
Yeah, if at all. It's not something they're dealing with day in and day out. And so I think like those big issues, gun issues, even the criminal justice reform that we're talking about, like those things, while they're important and they matter on the whole to thousands of people a day, on an individual level, they may not really matter to that individual. And so thinking about how to craft our message more around like what matters to the individuals.
I think too, it matters where you are, right? Because the challenges and concerns are going to be different in Greenville than they are in
Horry County,
Hampton County, right?
Yeah.
The issues in Richland County are going to be completely different than the ones in Jasper County, you know? So understanding that not everybody is going to have the same issues, because while those were the things that we talked about in the upstate, if you go down to those smaller counties like Allendale, they want to know what is the governor going to do to help them build their community? What is the governor going to do to help strengthen their local economy, their community economy, where businesses are not there? I mean, it's barren, right?
There used to be this phrase that all politics are local, right? Which is like what really matters to you, what really impacts you is local. But now it seems like because of national news coverage and these like massive conglomerates and like how everybody focuses on the national politics, like it seems like all politics are global right now. And so like people are going to ask you about Ukraine, even though the governor of South Carolina has nothing to do with what happens in Ukraine. People are going to ask you about like the Supreme Court, even though the South Carolina state representative has nothing to do with the Supreme Court, right? Like, so there's those kinds of things where like people, and so then as a candidate, how do you decide these are the issues I'm going to talk about, and this is my response to these national or global ideas?
No one asked about Ukraine or Supreme Court, not me specifically. But one of the questions that we got asked that is a national level issue is inflation, because that's created at the federal level. That's not created at the state level or even, the county level. But what we did was, looking at those national issues, we were prepared to talk about them and how we could combat them at the local level. So what can we do within our communities to help our the people of South Carolina fight against inflation, right?
Right.
How can we insulate our state from the impacts of that federally created problem? And it's things like, figuring out how to do away with certain taxes, lowering the rest of them while we work to do away with those. How do we, looking at occupational licensing, taking away those barriers so that people can start businesses in their communities. They can provide services that their communities need without having to jump through 15,000 hoops.
Right.
And
They're worried about they're going to do it wrong and get audited in 2 years, and
Or
thrown
how
in
are they-
jail, or
or
up
how are-
$15,000.
or how are
Right.
they going to pay to
Yeah.
start a business? Because a lot of people have really great ideas for businesses that have no starting overhead.
Yeah.
Have
But it could
y'all-
cost them hundreds of dollars to start the business just because of all of the filing fees and licensure and all of that stuff. And then, when people have to choose between buying groceries for their family and starting a business, they're going to choose the groceries, right? So why not make it easier for them to start the business?
I think it's a Visa commercial about the girl doing nails in the library to pay for school.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Every time that comes on, all I can think is they're encouraging her to illegally,
Yeah. That wouldn't fly.
because that's illegal.
Yeah.
You cannot do that without a permit from the government and paying them their cut of it. And if they
Mhm.
find out you've been doing that, they're going to throw your ass in jail.
Yeah.
And
We
all
were-
she's trying to do is cover the cost of school. There should be nothing wrong with that. The government does not need to be involved in this transaction.
Right.
Yeah.
From one individual to another. And you're exactly right. We talked a lot about occupational licensing last year. And I think it's going to be a recurring conversation because entrepreneurship after 2020, after COVID, has really taken off. We see a lot of people saying, I want to work for myself. I want to start my own business. I want to control my own destiny. And the government will stop that from happening in every capacity they possibly can because they are incentivized by their campaign contributing major corporations who don't want the competition of smaller individual startups, right? So we know this is a rigged system. One of the things we learned from campaigning is that the depth of corruption in the system that we're currently working in is much, much deeper than we even had any idea. Even as like anarchist libertarians, where we're like, man, it's all fucking broken. Right? Like, even then you
no
get
idea. Yeah.
Yeah, even then we got into campaigning and I was like, seriously? Like, that's even more broke than I knew. Like,
It's not just broken, it's like shattered, like into a billion pieces. It's sand. It's sand.
It's brutal. It's brutal.
Yeah.
But the beauty is we've not given up hope. And as much as campaigning was challenging this past year and in some ways enlightening, frustrating, we learned so much, I think, all three of us, that we're not going to stop. So we're in it for the next 2 years to the national level for the presidential election, right? In it for all of our local elections. And any of you that are out there watching and interested in being part of the Libertarian Party and possibly being candidates, you've got at least 3 of us who are willing to pick up a shovel and dig, because there's a whole lot of work to be done if that's the route you plan to take. We've been back for season 5, episode 1, what we learned from campaigning, and we'll be back next week on a Thursday night. Maybe a little bit more wine to be had between now and then, and certainly that night. Any last thoughts here on campaigning? Melissa, why would you do it again?
Oh, well, that's not the question I was going to answer.
No, well, you answer whatever question you
I'm
need.
going to go off on my own here.
Do it.
When we started, you were talking about the disconnect in representation, that it's 80-something% white males. So ranked choice voting, I got to do my spiel. Ranked choice voting increases representation. Rankthevote.com is the national group. If you're not in South Carolina, check them out, rankthevote.com. If you are in South Carolina, betterballotsc.org. That's us. We're trying to get ranked choice voting so we don't have the spoiler effect and people can vote for their number one favorite candidate without worrying that idiot Joe Biden or idiot Donald Trump is going to win without their vote. Check us out. All right. Thanks.
Hey, are you going to be here on Monday for the event at the State House?
I am going to try. I need someone to pick my children up from school. But yes, 1, 2, 3 is Ranked Choice Day, January 23rd from 2 to 4 at the State House in Columbia. We're having a rally. Come on out.
I'll be there. I'll be
Woohoo.
there. So I'm looking forward to that. Thank you, Melissa.
Yes.
Jessica, last thoughts on campaigning, what it taught us. Why would you do it again?
I would do it again because I think I have really good ideas and I think I have really good solutions and I think I could really do some good. And so I definitely would be willing to try again in the right circumstances, or under the right circumstances and with the, appropriate amount of support. But I did want to answer the last question in our show notes, which was why would you tell them that they should run? If someone is thinking about running for office, why would you tell them they should run? And I think if you feel strongly about the issues, I think if you care about your community and you want to be part of the solution, you should be part of the solution however you can be. And if you have the opportunity to run for office, definitely do it. It's not as hard as you think it's going to be. It's not as scary as you think it's going to be. And like Casey said, I mean, even if you aren't going to run as a libertarian, even if you just need a cheerleader, you let us know and we'll give you a little nudge. So
absolutely. We're here to support, first and foremost, libertarian candidates, but secondarily, any woman who wants to get out there and bump that 51% up. We'd appreciate that. So thanks, y'all. Appreciate you. We'll see you next week.
Bye.